we don't live that long, right? And we're really complicated. And it's not easy to learn how to be a person. It takes you like 40 years before you can learn to be a person enough so that you can get out of your mother's basement. So it's hard. That's half your life before. Well, maybe not 40, but certainly sometimes. It takes a long time to learn how to be a human being. And we're very, very complicated. We're way more complicated than we can understand. And we've been watching each other for a long time, watching ourselves, telling stories about ourselves, trying to draw some wisdom from our self-observations to teach to our children and to our grandchildren and so forth. And we've codified them in all sorts of strange ways in these memorable stories, fairy tales and myths and religious stories, all of those things. And what are they there for? They're there to remind us who we are, because we need to know who we are. I believe the most important idea that's ever been generated is the idea that men and women are made in the image of God. I think that a culture that isn't predicated on that belief, knowingly or unknowingly, and better knowingly, is doomed to absolute catastrophe. Because there's no reason to assume that there isn't something about us that's of transcendent value. If for no other reason than the fact of our consciousness, here we are, we're aware of what there is. And it isn't even obvious that there could be what there is if there wasn't something that's aware of it. And so our very awareness plays an integral role in the fact of being itself. And metaphysics aside, it's hard to see that anything could be more vital than that, more important than that. And then it isn't only that we apprehend reality, and therefore give it shape merely by our perceptions. It's also clearly the case that we partake in its shaping, and we call ourselves on that. You know that you feel guilty and ashamed when you're not doing what you could be doing, when you're not living up to your potential, when you're not making the most of what's offered to you. You understand at a very deep level that you're breaking. There's no other way of saying it. You're breaking a divine commandment. You're offered this unbelievably rich possibility, and it's there for you to grapple with. And you say, well, I don't believe in such things, in the divinity of humanity, or in divinity itself, or in the divine for that matter. But you can't fool yourself with that kind of argumentation. It doesn't stop you from feeling guilty and ashamed and worthless and disappointed and frustrated and angry and vengeful at the fact that you're wasting your life and you're noticing it, and that you're making yourself much less than you could be, and that you're making things around you worse for everyone else. And perhaps there's a psychopath or two in the audience who just doesn't give a damn, and who is focused only on instantaneous gratification for their most primordial impulses this moment, right? But it's not a sustainable mode of being, and it's very rare. And so the purpose of religious ideas is to wake us up. It's to remind us who we are, right? It's to remind us that we're imbued with a spirit that can be best described in some sense as immortal. It's the spirit that allows all of us to be conscious, that we all participate in simultaneously, that gives rise to the world and shapes it.
I lose my ability to think straight or intelligently in confrontational or unfriendly social situations. Any suggestions for adaptation or improvement? Well, a couple, I suppose. One is that when you get nervous in this kind of situation that you're describing, what often happens to people is they start paying attention to themselves. They get self-conscious. So, let's say I got self-conscious all of a sudden during this Q&A. what would happen is that I'd stop paying attention to the questions and the screen and what I'm doing, and I'd start paying attention to how I was feeling and to the nervousness, and then I'd start to get aware that I was not responding properly, and that would make me more nervous, and then I would get more aware of that, and that could just shut me down entirely. That's happened to me now and then in a lecture, and sometimes it almost happened when I was talking to Sam Harris the first time. What you have to do in a situation like that is, it's not so much that you have to stop attending to yourself, because if you start thinking, I should stop attending to myself, then you'll just think about yourself more. What you have to do instead is pay more attention to the situation and to the people that you're talking to. So you have to increase the degree to which you're attending outwardly, and that'll stop you from attending inwardly. That's a very effective technique. You can practice that, generally speaking. Every time you get nervous, start paying more attention, and that'll help you out a lot. That's a really good suggestion for social anxiety in general, is that if you see, most people, but not everyone, but most people have enough implicit social skill because they were reasonably socialized when they were children, so that they do know how to act in social situations, but they get anxious, and then that interferes with them implementing what they know. Just like if you're a pianist and you get anxious and self-conscious while you're playing, you'll forget what you know because, well, you've activated a different part of your brain. If you can remember to pay attention and you can direct your attention outward and you attend hard enough, then what will happen, and try to put the other person at ease and try to ask them questions, then that'll kick in the automatic, because you're paying attention to what the person is doing and to their facial expressions and all of that, that will clue in the automatic and implicit knowledge that you have and make things much more smooth and anxiety free. So attention really plays a huge role in regulating anxiety. There's this idea very deep idea in clinical psychology, a fundamental idea, which is that if someone's anxious about something, what you do is and it's getting in their way, you take what they're anxious about and you define it, because that already delimits it, right? Because one of the problems with being anxious about something is you won't speak of it. It's like Voldemort. And then if you don't speak of it, it's way bigger than it should be. As soon as you start talking about it, you cut it down to size. And it's for a bunch of reasons. It's because you're not as afraid of as many things as you think, and you're braver than you know, and more capable. So as soon as you're brave enough to start talking about what you're afraid of, then you see that there's more to you than you thought, and that there's less to the problem than you thought, and then you can decompose it further into smaller problems, and then you can figure out how to approach those smaller problems. And then it doesn't seem to me to be that you get less frightened. It seems to be that you get more courageous, which is way better than being less frightened, because there's lots of things to be frightened about. So if you're courageous, that really does the trick. Well, if you're dealing with someone who's particularly socially inept and you're doing psychotherapy with them, you might teach them how to shake someone's hand properly and say their name and remember the other person's name. And so you just practice that with them so that they have the motoric routine down. So that form of knowledge is built right into your body. It's like, look at the person, put out your hand, shake it, not like a dead halibut, but with a reasonable grip. Say your name, don't mumble it. Look at them so that they can hear you. And then when they say their name, try to remember it. And then so you can practice that with people, and so then they develop something that's motoric, right? It's embedded right in their body. And then you can say to them, well, the other thing you can do is when you start a conversation is don't sit there thinking about what you're going to say next, because then you won't be paying attention to the person and you'll make a fool out of yourself, because you'll manifest non sequiturs, right? Because you'll get out of it's like if you're dancing and all you're paying attention to is where your feet are, then you're going to step on the other person all the time. So you want to pay attention to the other person, and then whatever automatized social knowledge you have will come to the forefront. So it's a good thing to know if you're socially anxious, right? If you're socially anxious, one of the things you should do is pay way more attention to the person you're talking to rather than less. And you should pay as little attention as possible to yourself. So if you feel yourself falling in because you're anxious, then what you do is you push your attention out and pay attention to the person, because to the degree that you've been socialized, then all your automatic responses will kick in. So, but anyway, so you go out into the social world and you learn to shake someone's hand, and you learn how to listen to them and ask them questions, because that's the next thing, because people love, you can't just ask them random questions, obviously, but if they start talking to you and you don't understand something about what they're saying, or maybe something they said is interesting and you ask them a question, they're pretty damn happy about that, because it means you're actually paying attention to them, and people actually love to be paid attention to, because it hardly ever happens. So they really, really like it. And so, okay, so what's happening? Well, first of all, you're mastering the automated motor movements, right? Where to point your eyes, where to put your hands, how to move your lips, like really embodied knowledge. It's a special kind of memory. You're practicing that. So that's building new skills for you. And then by listening to the person and watching yourself interact, you're also generating new abstract information that enables you to conceptualize the world in a different way. So if you go out and talk to 10 different people or 50 different people, then you get to listen to what those 50 people said. You get to watch how they express themselves, and you gather a corpus of knowledge that changes the way you perceive, that broadens you as a social agent.